with regard to the suspected activities involving the 48 migrants from Venezuela that, as we understand it at this point, the facts of the case at this point, are that on Wednesday, September 14th, here in Bexar County in the city of San Antonio, our understanding is that a Venezuelan migrant was paid what we would call a bird dog fee to recruit approximately 50 migrants from the area around a migrant resource center on San Pedro here in San Antonio. As we understand it, 48 migrants were lured, I will use the word lured, under false pretenses into staying at a hotel for a couple of days. They were taken by airplane. At a certain point, they were shuttled to an airplane where they were flown to Florida and then eventually flown to Martha's Vineyard, again, under false pretenses is the information that we have, that they were promised work, they were promised the solution to several of their problems. They were taken to Martha's Vineyard from what we can gather for little more than a photo op, video op, and then they were unceremoniously stranded in Martha's Vineyard. What infuriates me the most about this case is that here we have 48 people that are already on hard times, right? They are here legally in our country at that point. They have every right to be where they are. And I believe that they were preyed upon. Somebody came from out of state, preyed upon these people, lured them with promises of a better life, which is what they were absolutely looking for, with the knowledge that they were going to cling to whatever hope they could be offered for a better life, to just be exploited and hoodwinked into making this trip to Florida and then onward to Martha's Vineyard for what I believe to be nothing more than political posturing to make a point. Well, look, we all know that during a political campaign, things can get nasty, things can get out of hand, but when you're playing with human lives of people that are already in a desperate situation, people that again, had every right to be where they were, but were lured under false pretenses, that does tend to bother me quite a bit. And so we are absolutely opening up an investigation into this. Since this past weekend, I've been talking to at least one non-governmental organization involved in the case, LULAC National. Also been talking to at least one attorney involved with representing these folks that are still up on the East Coast, as well as several members of the media, local and national. And all indications are that at this point we are going to be opening an investigation. It is way too early for me to start naming any suspects. We do have the names of some suspects involved that we believe are persons of interest in this case at this point, but I won't be parting with those names. I think to be fair, I think everybody on this call knows who those names are already, so I won't be naming any of them. But suffice it to say, we will be opening up a case.
Now look, I'm no lawyer, but I'd imagine that if I was Ron DeSantis, this is probably the point at which I'd find myself an attorney. This is Javier Salazar, the Bexar County Sheriff in San Antonio, Texas. And this case is emanating in Texas, given the fact that the migrants involved in this whole Martha's Vineyard stunt actually originated from Texas before DeSantis hired a private contractor to fly them first to Florida, which is where the migrants had wanted to relocate, before shuttling them back on another plane and ultimately dropping them off on a remote island with no housing, no jobs, and no essential services. I should note too, just as an aside, that the private vendor that DeSantis contracted to transport these migrants, Verital Systems Inc., was paid $615,000. That comes out to $12,300 per migrant. Now, I'm not sure if you've flown lately, but just so we're clear, flights from Florida to North Carolina do not generally cost $12,300 per person. In fact, you could probably travel from Florida to anywhere on the planet and still not come close to $12,300. I looked up the normal cost to fly from Miami to Martha's Vineyard, and you can find flights for less than $400 per person. That means that Florida taxpayers fronted the cost of these flights at 30 times the normal price. How's that for owning the libs, knowing that your taxpayer dollars down in Florida are going toward getting royally screwed on flight costs, also that Ron Ron DeSantis could enjoy a groveling cable hit on Fox. Now, a number of immigration law experts have weighed in and suggested that Ron DeSantis may have actually trafficked those migrants given the circumstances under which they were transported. A number of those migrants have explained that they were told they were being flown to Boston, where they would have housing, essential services, and expedited work papers. But they weren't flown to Boston. There was no housing. There were no jobs. In fact, officials on the ground in Martha's Vineyard didn't even have advance notice of their arrival, meaning they had to scramble to find accommodations for 50 people on an island at a moment's notice. Tallahassee-based immigration attorney Elizabeth Ricci said, quote, "An enticement like that, regardless of whether you sign a waiver, is fraud, and that is part of the definition of human trafficking. I think that everybody on those planes has a case to legalize as a direct result of being transported by the governor." Another lawyer, Massachusetts-based Rachel Self, wrote in a statement, quote, "We believe they are victims of kidnapping. It may very well result that every individual who was induced on those planes by fraud becoming eligible for a U visa." In other words, if law enforcement also finds that these migrants were trafficked as the result of their lack of immigration status, then they would be eligible for a special kind of visa that protects victims of human trafficking. How's that for irony? Ron DeSantis wanted to wash his hands of migrants, and instead he ends up under investigation, while those very migrants he trafficked are ultimately able to legalize and become citizens. Bravo, DeSantis. Bravo. Now, DeSantis' office has responded to news of the investigation being opened, with his communications director writing, quote, "Immigrants have been more than willing to leave Bexar County after being abandoned, homeless, and left to fend for themselves. Florida gave them an opportunity to seek greener pastures in a sanctuary jurisdiction that offered greater resources for them, as we expected. Unless the Massachusetts National Guard has abandoned these individuals, they have been provided accommodations, sustenance, clothing, and more options to succeed following their unfair enticement into the United States, unlike the 53 immigrants who died in a truck found abandoned in Bexar County this June." First of all, if you were wondering whether whataboutism is alive and well in the GOP, apparently it's okay to traffic human beings because, you see, back in June, migrants died in Texas in a completely unrelated event, and so that gives Ron DeSantis license to now traffic migrants through his own state. Obviously. Also, talk about gaslighting. In that statement, DeSantis' office literally says, quote, "Florida gave them an opportunity to see greener pastures in a sanctuary jurisdiction that offered greater resources for them." I'm sorry, but what? DeSantis had them dropped off on an island with literally no resources. How is that a jurisdiction with greater resources? That they eventually got to Joint Base Cape Cod, where there was accommodations and food and essential services, wasn't thanks to Ron DeSantis, it was in spite of him. And so clearly, based not just on the stunt itself, but even this correspondence from DeSantis' office after it became clear how they abused these migrants, there's not only no remorse, but they're actually doubling down on this depravity. They're still positioning themselves as if somehow they helped these people by lying to them about where they were going, lying to them about what would be awaiting them, and lying to them about their long-term prospects there, all for a photo op and a few cable hits on Fox. Either DeSantis is so shameless that he doesn't mind the blatant hypocrisy, or he's so sociopathically disillusioned that he actually does think he did something virtuous, but either way, he's proven himself to be far too dangerous to ever hold power. And let's not forget for a second that this is all courtesy of the same party that is currently, as we speak, positioning themselves as some sort of champions for life by passing abortion bans. So apparently, it is pro-life to traffic humans. It's pro-life to exploit the most vulnerable for a photo op. It's pro-life to lure people onto a plane that's headed somewhere entirely different than where they were told, so they can end up stranded on an island with no accommodations, no food, no medical care, and no services. Republicans don't care about people, they care about forcing women to give birth. But once that baby is born, they want no health care, no food programs, no child tax credit, no SNAP benefits, no Medicaid, no public education, and if they can use you as a pawn in a political stunt, you better believe they're gonna do it. These people care about life the same way that Donald Trump cares about anyone not named Donald Trump. So good on the Bexar County Sheriff for actually moving to hold people like Ron DeSantis to account, and for sending a message to a Republican Party that views itself as completely unaccountable to the law that their free ride is coming to an end. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.